Okay, so Charlie Weingroff and myself are meeting up here. We're in Santa Monica, and I was here, and of course Charlie was flying in this morning, so we said, why not? We'll meet up for a conversation. Charlie was introduced by Peter Lakatos, and yeah, this man has a wealth of experience, a wealth of information, and like all people who are quite innovative, they can think a little bit different. So we hope to pick Charlie's brain a little bit and see what's in there and see how it goes.
Look here. I was saying in my preparation, I think if for your viewers, your followers, the message is a little different, or at least my background and my perspective of the value of breathing, but how it relates to many other things might be a little bit different. But I love everybody. Everything is good. I think sometimes when we attach things to very specific names, like we were talking a little bit off camera before, you can call it whatever you want. But what is this? What is truly happening? And if I call it something different, that doesn't make me right and someone else wrong. I will likely use words that do not create any teams or emotional challenge. I love yoga. But if I call it something different, that doesn't mean it's not yoga. It just means because if somebody hates yoga because of what they think it is, I am probably going to catch more flies with honey by calling it something else, probably more in line with what the desired goal or the desired adaptation.
And do you find, because you picked up yoga there, which is obviously coming from the Eastern world,
Yeah.
and because I often shy away from the word meditation, and I
similar, yeah.
shy away from sometimes pre-match anxiety and talk about flow states. Language is important.
Yeah, the words are analogies. An analogy is this other type of illustration or description to make your point. So, for instance, I could continue this podcast in Spanish. I could say the exact same words. I could try to have the same body language and talking with my hands, but those words don't mean anything to someone who doesn't understand Spanish. I'm saying the same thing. So words and that are analogies, and this is more about coaching and communicating.
Yeah.
And I bring it up because I know it'll be different.
It's important.
So now the best analogies as a coach, I'm only speaking as a coach. If I want you to understand a concept, the best analogies are ones that tag into your emotion. Now, I have positive emotion and I have negative emotion. I will likely try to target your positive emotion. But if I don't know anything about you, emotions are your memories, both positive or negative. Somebody may say something, to one person, it's very off color. And the other person's like, I don't even know why they got upset because that meant something. Or if my voice reminds you of someone that beat you up when you were little, I probably will not say anything of value, not because the words are poor choices, but there's some type of emotional construct. So if we can use words more often that help you appreciate your positive memories, I have to know about you though, and that can become a challenge, and that's the best coaches. Like in my world, if I were to use a movie reference, okay, a young NFL or NBA basketball player has a completely different library of movies that they have positive emotion to than a golfer or a private client through someone of age. Like I can't say the same movie, but if you know a lot of them, you'll kind of just pick them. And then the best coaches, not me, the best coaches will typically use words that, I don't know how you do it. You say all this wild, crazy, I know exactly what you want me to do. Well, that's coaching. But as it relates particularly to yoga, I think because of its probably nebulous presentation at times. Remember, I do not subscribe to this. Yoga is a very powerful, useful tool. I may have some condescent that may be of use, but if somebody I can call something happy baby, which is a very traditional yoga position where you're holding on to your feet or somewhere up there. I could also call it 3.5 month, developmental position, which comes from a different world, where I have high level of training. It's the exact same thing. You would coach the positions and the goals of breathing the same way. I could probably also call it some version of Pilates because of the potential load of your legs to challenge, if that's even accurate. I could call it dead bug, a version.
Yes.
And if we're all envisioning someone laying on their back with this very tall neck and their rib cage is stacked over their pelvis, those pieces are all shared by 4 different worlds who unfortunately probably don't know that, number one, that they even exist, but rather, no, that's not happy baby. That's 3.5 months. It's gone. The value of sharing information and teaching is probably gone, or at least minimized. So I will try to use other words. Now, if I do say, I have not found many or any ardent traditional yoga practitioner that said, McKeown, yoga is not for you. I've never heard anybody ever say that's a problem. That's a problem. Same thing with Pilates. When people ask me about no, these are great. Now, I would say, like, maybe I'll call it dead bug. You're going to call it mat Pilates. Who cares? Do you think your coach practitioner would ever believe that their best weapon is not useful? It has to be. Nothing works for everybody. So I'm sure there's other things as well that, and perhaps some that I champion, except that's not the only weapon that I would have. We must be able to say that something doesn't work for somebody. So if that's the individual's experience with a word like yoga, man, I'm not messing with yoga. Everybody that walks in, every yoga solves everything. That's absurd. That's absurd. I can look in the camera and say that's absurd. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have high value. It doesn't mean that there isn't brilliant, both Eastern and Western explanations to why this is useful. You got to be able to tell people, I'm not your guy. I can't help you. This isn't your problem is not going to be solved by this. I don't think I'm being unfair in suggesting that is a very common thing. So but again, going back to the words, I try to use words that you see how I've mapped 4 things. They're all the same. They're exactly the same. We talked a little bit about acupuncture before where there are many techniques where traditional acupuncture, which can only be performed by someone that has Asian medicine training. Like, I cannot tell you that, if I'm wrong about acupuncture, then I'm wrong. But I may use the exact same needle and the exact same psychomotor approach, but I'm going to tell you, and you're happy. Yeah, we have the same objective measure that can be measured by a third person who we don't know. So we're not gonna, I would get frustrated by, like, oh, like, your kidneys, like, come on, like, that's not real. Like,
Yeah.
But if you needle the person and then we look at creatinine bun and all the measurements that are standardized, you did something. Like, you can't say it didn't happen if it was measurable. You can't tell me about this. I might be doing the same exact thing. I would never be treating something that was related to the kidneys, but I have a different explanation. I believe that when the needle does in this area, well, that's Li4. I'm like, no, it's the multifidus. Like they're both right. But you see how that type of language can breed contempt.
But does it create a lot of confusion?
Yes, it does. It does, and it's not useful. It's not useful. And I think my contribution to a solution, not but a solution, is that, like, I don't care if somebody spreads peanut butter on you. Can we at least agree on the measurement? And if we can't agree on the measurement, which is very unfortunate when we have these models based in words that are not measurable. But I have a student who actually started as a personal trainer. So he already has a similar background that is not typically shared by a tried and true Asian medicine practitioner. So we're already kind of biased in this outcome here. But I met him in seminars, and I said to him, you don't want to be a trainer. You don't want to be a personal trainer. Stop with all you want to be go to PT school, go to Cairo school, go to Asian medicine school. He did without me knowing. And it was a very mentor type thing with and I will stick with him forever. We filmed about an hour of something like this because he's the only doctor of Asian medicine that actually can legitimately talk about both of these things. And you know, I said, what is chi? What is energy? Like, talk to me about this business. Like, yeah, and he's like, yeah, like that's, you know, because he would say that's not a valid, it's not wrong. You can do whatever you want. And I believe patients as a customer should be able to choose whatever they want. But that's the confusion is very real. The confusion, unfortunately, as we're in a state where this is very, very litigious in terms of who is legally permissible, and it's wild. It's not just you can and they can't. They can, this one can't. It's wild. The suggestion that certain usage of a needle is unsafe, that's not. I'm picking sides now. Especially if you only needle where there is a bony block, meaning if I put it where I touch and you're even someone my size, you know where the scapula is. Just put it over the scapula. The reason we have a scapula is to protect our cephalad organ systems. There's a bone there, so nobody can, you know, get you from behind. So if you hit the bone, that means you can't hit the lungs or so you should be able to pick a needle and understand the body type. So don't do it in other places that there's not a bony block, and then don't keep looking for it. And then as you get more experience, because that's a big thing that I think is very unfortunate that adds to the confusion in that space, which is Mr. Or Mrs. Doctor of Doctor of Asian Medicine, which is my guy has this, so I'm not against this. I'm against this suggestion that because there's thousands of hours of education versus a PT that can gain access legally in a state in America, you know, very quickly. That doesn't mean it's unsafe. We're all on the hook, you know. Like there's so that adds to confusion. Those are two completely, like when people say like, oh, like Charlie, it's like acupuncture. I'm like, no, like I have to say that not only from a legal point of view, but it's not. I'm just using a needle instead of my hands. Where now we could even argue what is happening when we touch someone, and there's a whole list of things. I don't know if that's of value what I believe. I don't believe things are being put back into place or knots or trigger points are real.
What do you think is going on?
Manual therapy?
Yeah.
Okay. I think there's only one series of acute. If it's acute, it's not an adaptation. So I don't know what the word is. These acute changes that lead to a desirable effect. So let's say I start rubbing your shoulder and I think this area needs something. That's already, we're kind of almost off the rails because that's very debatable. There's not going to be very much inter-rater reliability. I might be able to say, yeah, like that's the spot, but you can't do much. Anyway.
So what you're saying is that the therapist is not going to, or would they pick up?
So if you and I are my opinion,
yeah,
because this stuff is really not so much studied. In dry needling, it is. A trigger point is a real thing. There's multiple research at the NIH level that says this is what it is and what it's not. But even in that case, that's done under ultrasound. It's done under acidic milieu, which maybe, we said acidic, because that is a huge piece that I think can tie into a lot of the pieces. I can explain this epiphany as it relates to acidity. But that's not, so here, let me explain that the series of research. Jay Shah is a name that we can look up, Sikdar. So I'm the therapist, and I'm like, right there. That's a thing. So a trigger point has to be tender. It has to be twitchy. It has to be uncomfortable. it has to have this common referral. Otherwise, it's not a trigger point. It's one of the other things. It's a tender point. Tender and trigger points are used in this wild fashion. Okay, I'm like, it's right there. Okay, I leave the room. Shah comes in the room and breaks out the ultrasound, and he's like, I don't know what Charlie's talking, but wherever he pointed, that is clearly tissue that looks different than the rest of the area where Charlie said it wasn't a trigger point. That's facts. Like that can be looked up. And then Shah leaves the room. I don't know if I have the names right.
Yeah, sure, of course.
Shah leaves the room, and then Sikdar comes in, and he's like, right here? Yeah, Charlie said it was right there, and Shah said that's the spot. They draw the milieu out of that spot. And they also draw the milieu out of the one where I said it wasn't the trigger point. It has a higher local acidity. The pH is lower, which in my mind could only have happened when the Bohr effect started to, have some impact. I think that's where there's significant linkage. Otherwise, clearly, respiratory loading or respiratory stress is not the only way to affect blood acidity. There are other ways that this can happen. So that's so now with probably high levels of validity, meaning or reliability. I'm sorry, reliability. I'm going to say it's right there. But as soon as other therapists come in, I don't think there's no evidence that they're going to touch this. Okay, so that's the starting point. But I don't think it's bad because, again, I must stick with the plan. If I spread peanut butter on you, if your shoulder moves better, it's real. It may not be why you thought it was. Okay, so now somebody does their pin and stretch. I don't want to say different commercial names because they go get mad. They dig around, they elbow, they knuckle, whatever they do. And they say that this is an adhesion. Okay, again, no evidence. This is a word that you'll never hear me say in a positive light. There's not adhesion. Like, this is silly. But you did something, maybe you feel it. You're not lying. You're not a bad human being. That's the other thing. Like, just because somebody doesn't agree is all a significant component of you also beat your children and rob banks. Like no, like you're not a good therapist. Like that's not a bad. That can't be like this horrible thing. Like, you're allowed to be a really, really good person and not be good at your job. Like, that can't be weird. Yes. But it's weird in this world where we all have this high altruism to help people. So now, why did your shoulder move better if it wasn't this mechanical change where you broke up an adhesion, which I will say is nonsense. Like that didn't happen. There, and you could prove it. Like, ultrasound first, ultrasound after. Oh God, no, we can't do that. There is something that you can prove that happened, and it lives in the world. Combination. Anytime I touch you, oxytocin is stimulated. People feel better with oxytocin. If we're talking about oxytocin, you have to talk about serotonin. So clearly there is evidence that tactile inputs will immediately impact oxytocin and serotonin. So now I'm talking real things. Now, they are not practical to measure out in a clinical setting, but you could certainly measure it in a study. Like, I don't even care if your shoulder moves or not, but we can measure what happened. There's clear evidence that creatine kinase decreases. It's kind of in this, my opinion, is soft support for wearing leggings for compression, for recovery. Sure. And then the third one is dopamine. Because if you think that when I bang on your shoulder that it's going to move better, that you can't stop dopamine. Like, you can't. So now, if there's some that's why that's how I think manual therapy works. It's a sensory experience that you liked. And it might have been because you were paying a lot of money for Charlie to fly to LA, or that you went in with incredible emotion of desperation that, McKeown's gonna be the guy that finally, I had to wait 3 years to see him, and he's supposed to be the best therapist on earth. He's doing the exact same things that the last 10 people did. And that puts a lot of humility on people that are honest, rather than they think their technique really did it.
This is amazing though, because the first thing that comes to my head is placebo effect.
There is no such thing as placebo.
Okay.
You just measured the wrong thing. I say no. It's like it's all here. You boom, like you just set it up on a tee. I will tell you, there's no such thing as a placebo because in order for the word placebo to be used, you had to see the desirable effect. You can't have a placebo then if you didn't get the result, right? Is that fair? So if I told you that when your knee feels better when I jiggle your thigh, and I gave you this any level of construct that was shown to have not happened. Like you categorically, I said we broke up adhesions in your rectus femoris. You called in Shaw and, and they all altered. Like there is clearly no change in the rectus femoris before and after. There is a clear change in your Thomas test or your subjective report of need. All of these things are real happen. This is how my interest is to bring everybody together. You did get the result. It had nothing to do with why you thought you did it. So there is some danger in that. But so we're going to call that a placebo. No, you just measured the wrong thing. It had to have worked. It had to have done something. If I blow on your knee, well, let's understand. And I think one way that we could probably bring together manual therapy is oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine. That's my opinion.
Do you think it was something throughout our evolution that is inherently characteristic of human beings that touch was involved a lot?
Had to be. Interesting.
Not just during babies, of course, because you can understand, of course, mother and child.
Yeah.
But
I think the DNA to procreate when we and I have never talked about this, but it makes perfect sense to me. What I have talked about is, in terms of why manual therapy, why do we like to hold hands? Why is there an entire Eastern model of reflexology that exists? And then with the ears, I don't know, auricular therapy. If you look at both the sensory and motor homunculus in the brain, the four biggest, those cartoons, the four biggest areas, number one is the hands, in no particular order, the hands, but the palms more than the dorsum, the feet, the sole more than the dorsum, your face, the lips and ears bigger than everything else. This is why when you punch in the face, it hurts. And then the fourth is our genitalia. So if whatever mechanism, that part I won't go so much into, created this design, I already alluded to some model. If that design did that, and of course it's true, we can't, it's ontology, we can't prove how it happened, but we know it's real. Those areas are all significant of certainly high pleasure leading to procreation and copulation. That's why we like holding hands. It's why we like getting our feet rubbed. It's why we like grandma rubbing your face and we like being kissed. And then of course our genitalia, if it wasn't such a pleasurable experience by science, which is then pushed into what we think. So that adds to the likely pleasure and desirable experience. So then we do this, and then we have babies.
Sure.
So I think there's a story there that will support the manual therapy component. That's my opinion.
You recently went down the route of breathing in a small way, and sometimes what often kind of I try to get my head around is that you talked about interdisciplinary. And that people tend to be in their own silos. But in terms of the application of breathing in the PT world, because of course the movement of the diaphragm, the generation of intra-abdominal pressure, even using breathing as part of recovery. I see you have an aura ring. So there's a connection there. How come breathing has not been, or what do you think what's your interpretation? Breathing has not been taken too seriously. Probably putting you on the spot now.
No, because we're all confined to our own conformational bias, where people that I hang out with would not share that thought process. But I think the first thing that I can think of is that I would define breathing and respiration as completely different things. Breathing is a little bit more nebulous. Respiration is this thing that somehow air gets in our nose or mouth and gets into the alveoli, and then there's this cardiopulmonary value point. Well, I'm still breathing, because breathing and respiration are very synonymous. I think there's probably something to that, and that's the words. So again, I'm picking the words. If we looked it up, is breathing and respiration, are they defined differently? I don't know. I'm defining them differently, particularly as an effort to answer this potential question. I think moving on, the messages of low tension, soft methods that involve breathing, whether it's this emotional words business or that's not what I do, it creates two teams, because the other team, maybe people that are built like me and have big long beards and cut off shirts, that breathing is very hard. It's very, very tense. It's very strong, and it's attached to the opposite of relaxation. It's attached to running a very, very long period of time and being uncomfortable. It's pursing your breath twice to punch or kick somebody. It's about holding your breath to bench press 400 pounds. That is a completely different world. So it's very, very easy for the performance that person to value breathing, but not that other type. And then of course the yoga crowd, or I apologize, but that the softer, but they're all the same and they're all linked, and that's unfortunate. I think
So what you're saying is that when people talk about breathing, they don't consider the application of breathing. That oftentimes people have this idea of breathing in their head and they're thinking it's specifically all about yoga breathing. But they're not looking outside of it in terms of the application.
Yeah, because it's not how they help people.
Yeah.
So it's like you only work on the plumbing when you build the house. So you have the best plumbing kit ever. You may not have certain tools because you only deal with plumbing. The general contractor has to know a little bit about everything. So he or she is like, don't worry about him. He's just, because he's only going to handle the bathrooms, because he's running his mouth on that. You don't need the bulldozer. But before he ever got in to start to put the copper pipes for the bathrooms, the whole place had to get leveled. We don't need that. We just need these. And I think I think a lot of that is more sociological. On everyone is altruistic and everybody wants to help, but they want to do what they want to do. And everybody has to be able to, as I mentioned before, you have to be able to say that the breathing that I'm really good at, or the breathing, the coaching of breathing, or the application of breathing, it's not going to help you. And that goes back to measuring things in a very systematic way.
Do you see any change happening in your world?
Well, look, you got a shirt on. Look at his shirt. Yes, it's changing. I think because we should start to appreciate. And look, there's a deeper conversation on the red threads that I talked a little bit offline. But if there's any level of interest in listening to someone speak and you give him or her a chance, maybe they got something for you. And I feel very good with that. And the only reason I might suggest is this is my interest in winning. I'll do whatever. Not everybody has that, and that's okay. But yeah, we just have to communicate and listen. And if you don't like what you hear, you run out. It's okay.
The point that we were on, Charlie.
There were several.
There were several, all right.
I hope I'm not talking too fast.
No, because I'm kind of intrigued. You spoke about the Bohr effect earlier on. And I'm often surprised when I hear people talk.
Me too. Actually, you talk about so as we mentioned, the spaces that I live in are not usually your cohort to your
But
podcast.
surely
But so I listen to all your podcasts, and I know there's value anyway. And I know you work at high levels of athletics, and just like most of us, I'm a little bit more public than others. But sometimes we have to keep that under wraps. I think it's sometimes silly too. But you talk about the Bohr effect all the time, and it's this undeniable thing. Can I tell you how I describe it? All right, so most people think of me from New York. I've never actually lived in New York City. I lived below and above. I lived in New Jersey and I lived in Greenwich. This is the first town outside of New York State. So we're going to think of the New York City subways. It's a train, okay? And this train goes, the H train, and I don't know that there is one. The H train goes in a big circle, and it goes. The big two, there's two big stations, just like in New York City. There's the Grand Central Station and there's the Penn Station. Your heart and your lungs, okay? So the train has to hit these two big stations. And it's called the H train because the carts of the cars of the train, they carry hemoglobin. So you see, like, you make it fun. You're smiling. I'm so happy. But this is how I would try to teach. Now, I will also say that, and I hope you recognize this at some point, if I needed to talk much more big words and scientific, I will be happy to. I think sometimes when you talk, like, my messages are very cartoony because I want you to understand. I want to get it to a level, and then you dig. Yeah, so please, if I say anything that's not quite consistent,
so you're saying the H is the carriage, so that's hemoglobin.
They're in. So hemoglobin is the cart,
yeah.
And then oxygen gets on and off.
It's the passenger.
Yes. Okay. Now there are many different ways that the bloodstream can be impacted in its pH. One of them is your breathing. So we'll call it respiratory / metabolic. And again, this is very important to me because whether we devise intervals and how, and just for anxiety, because I see no one's regular. I see non-athletes that have all sorts of different musculoskeletal constructs. So whatever it is you're doing, for instance, there's one of the things that I would be very disfavorable to is this idea that somehow blowing up a balloon has value. This is and I would ask anybody well, that's whoa. Ask a physiologist or a respiratory physiologist that doesn't even care because I care. I don't want people to do this. So ask somebody else to see if what I am saying is accurate. Because I always, I'm knuckled up. Like, everything I say, you're gonna find out. Oh my God, they left that part out of your little seminar with the. So if you start to exhale heavily,
yeah,
whether you're blowing up a balloon, not once, not one time, but for that's your gimmick. Just like, so you're setting up your conditioning intervals very foolishly. Less impact with resistance training, but certainly with your repeated efforts for conditioning. But anytime you start blowing off a lot of air, the bicarbonate ion is what's going outside. And this, the partial pressure changes and the pH goes up. My understanding of Bohr effect. You're shaking your head. We're good. Make sure you see him shaking his head. It's good. Okay, so now the train does something very interesting. And then I put up a slide. It's like meant to be funny. So but you'll remember it. So in a more basic bloodstream, oxygen doesn't get off the train. And I have a picture of like this guy like holding the doors, like no one can get out. If you never know, New York City subway is very serious stuff. So now, if oxygen doesn't get off, why? Because your body is now in this compensatory phase, and your body will typically, almost always, at least in my mind, figure out a way to not die. So your brain is operating under the system that, okay, if we don't let any oxygen off, because it doesn't care why you did this, but blowing up a balloon or heavy exhalation started to create this basic bloodstream. And it's like, oh, what? This ain't good. How about we get this idiot to stop his or her physical activity so we are not going to give them as much. There will be some oxygen that scoots out so your muscles can continue to work. Clearly, we can get to this, that the more or more efficient mitochondria you have peripherally, that little bit of oxygen can go a long way. If you have very, very little or very poorly functioning mitochondria, you give them a lot of oxygen, they're not going to do much. That's not mitochondria in my mind isn't directly part of my story here, but it does matter because when we say nobody gets off the train, of course some oxygen is getting off the train because your volition is going to continue. So then what happens? Part of it's like this. In my mind, as blood becomes more basic, then it becomes more acidic. And then as the train goes around.
And is it getting more acidic because there's not enough oxygen getting to the tissues?
Yes.
So the hydrogen ion coming from the tissue doesn't get oxidized.
As well as the activity that you're doing. So not so much blowing up a balloon, but if you're doing intense training, like perhaps while you're here in LA, intense high threshold training above VO2 max, lactate is a good thing. Like it's nothing. You'll never hear me say lactic acid. That's not even a real thing. It can't be. I don't know that it can be actually. Oh, that's lactic acid. It's not a thing. It's lactate and hydrogen ions. So if your activity continues, your body then senses, well, how do we get out of this basic environment? It's already creating a whole bunch of hydrogen ions. Boom, and then you go acidic. Or you're shifting back towards acidic. That's the Bohr effect. The Bohr effect is like this. So then when the train gets back to Grand Central and Penn Station, it's empty. There's no oxygen isn't getting on the train because your body is not going to let you continue, and then you're done. That's when your legs are done or your arms are done. So because the oxygen is going to get on different hemoglobin trains, because there's many trains in New York City subway, so that you don't die. And so there is perfusion to your liver and your kidneys, and certainly what might have to be your kidneys because of physical activity. So to me, the acidity component is a huge driver, because remember I told you Sikdar, when the valid and reliable trigger point intra-rater, I studied another manual therapy model. And it is called, and I'm happy to say it because I think they're very good people, fascial manipulation. Okay. The gentleman who was the inventor was what's his name? Stecco, his name is Stecco, an Italian physical therapist. He doesn't speak English. And it is clearly an amalgamation of Eastern and Western models, and they have different names for this point and this point, et cetera, significant memorization, which I'm not keen on. I don't know them all, but the science, and they're like, he does it and somebody feels better. And it's a very complicated model. You only treat the person once a week. They don't have a huge value for physical activity and motor skill acquisition, which I think is a gap. Doesn't mean they're not doing great things to change pain. His children, Antonio Stecco and Carla Stecco, are MDs, and they've done all the research. So automatically you get a, I'm going to cut you off. Oh, well, his children are researching his model. Of course, they're not researching the efficacy of the physical therapy treatment. They're saying, Dad, show us what you did. We're going to see what happened inside. The areas that had the value to where they do, you have to get up to somehow 40 degrees Celsius to break glycoaminoglycans, which is real now. That to me is, and that's very, so you have to use cross-friction massage. The areas that had value to the person's report, they do some, they call it conformational testing, like, oh yeah, my shoulder doesn't hurt so much. We can be better than that, but they have that. They measured it always was acidic. So now.
So it was acidic prior to.
Yes. So those were the areas that had a win. Well, what's so unique about this area other than Luigi Stecco saying do it here? Because he's doing it for a different reason, because it's based on Rolfing. Rolfing and then heavy is uncomfortable. So now you have an Eastern model that talks about acidity, and you have a Western model from National Institutes of Health that talks about acidity on these areas where the tissue has changed. Now we go back to the Bohr effect, that if we're somehow either mentally motivated or unaware, how about the way to never get those points is to minimize exposures to acidity. Well, we can't, I said minimize. because you absolutely have to have acidity for other types of adaptations, hormonal, hypertrophy. Like you can't, it's not all good or bad. Like you have to keep your friends close and enemies closer. But if we don't appreciate this stupidity of blowing up a balloon because they didn't tell you about the Bohr effect, then all of a sudden you're going to wind up in this, this area that is scientifically shown to change the density of tissue. So now that's how I think when we breathe without this heavy exhale, all of a sudden it changes because it's a very mild. It's only not fibrotic. I don't think breathing can change fibrosis, in my opinion. It's done. Yeah, it's we got to do some other things. But that to me is how lay on your back and breathe, and all of a sudden you just gained like 30 degrees of motion. Well, I think the Bohr effect and the autonomic nervous system has to, in my mind. Remember, I always say in my mind because I'm drawing all sorts of lines here.
No, I think it's very interesting. You talked about cross friction as well to generate heat.
Yeah.
To bring it up to 40 degrees. So if you look at the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve, which explains the Bohr effect, there's also a right shift of the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve with increased temperature. So I'm just trying to get my head around it. So you have somebody say with a sore part of the body, the manual therapist is doing their thing with that. You feel that it's the reduction of acidity as a result of possibly increased oxygen delivery to that area.
Remember, it gets red. It gets red. Yeah.
So there's heat, but maybe also the person feels relaxed and finally there's somebody doing. I don't know, and I know people is not going to be scientific.
No, but that's
in terms of improving blood flow and oxygen delivery to that spot.
I think, and again, some of the places that people know that I have worked in, where unfortunately people die. Like there's a mindset of winning that I will be very aggrandizing. If I'm good at something, it's wanting to be better than everybody. It's not a contest. That's what I want. So we have to, at least for me, I think if we can accept that the system is so complicated, and
the human body,
the human system is so complicated that there's going to be things that we think, and that's a theory. Like the things, everything I'm saying is theory. Not everything. I'm drawing upon what we do know in the literature and the science. And the science and the literature are two different things. Science has a role in this incredibly multivariant human system that it can't be researched. Like it's almost impossible to just, you can take bits and like you take like 13 studies and you just like reorganize. Dude, it's right there. Except authors of number 8, wouldn't even know what authors of number 2 are doing. But then it goes 7, 2, 3, 4, 8. It doesn't even go in the order that they're presented in. And if we can accept that all we want is for McKeown's shoulder to move better, and we agree on the test so that he can put something really heavy in his hand and throw it over his head and create a whole nother world of adaptation. That's like rehab and training kind of thing. That to me is all that matters. So my threshold for accepting something is maybe different. Yeah, I just want to do because also then I can make friends. And then I can learn from you figuratively, of course you, but others. No, like I believe it happened. So like there'll be a lot of manual therapy constructs that clearly create redness, and the you can take like a 4-day seminar of manual therapy, of which there's no more than 18 minutes of any science, and it's actually legitimate science, believe it or not. That the reduction. I'm sorry, no. A reduction of partial pressure of oxygen. Okay, like you need oxygen. Is you sure? When oxygen goes down, the brain is triggered to transcribe alpha pro 1 collagen, which is a fancy way of saying scar tissue. Except scar tissue isn't bad. It's a remodeling. It's just new tissue. It's scar tissue when the direction of the fibers is not in the direction that you want to move. That's so keep your friends close and enemies closer. So now in martial arts or other types of mobility drills, like you hold incredible amounts of tension. You're using that mild deoxidization to tell your brain, hey, trigger, like put down some collagen here, please. We're good. We'll hold out. breathing clearly allows you to hang out in the split. People, I've done a lot of splits in my career. But now if we can accept that maybe it was also part of dopamine because somebody got to come to the big city and paid all this money to see their hero, I can't dissociate from that. Not only do I feel that makes me humble, but at the end of the day, if you walked out and the tests that are important to you, also important to me to some degree, but everything that's important to you, this is like one of the first things I ask somebody. Like, not only do I say, how can I help you? But like, is there anything that you can do, like, that you would know it was better right away? Oh yeah, like as soon as I squat this deep, I feel it in the front of my ankle. Great. Emotional. Then it's emotional. Even though that might be something I highly value as in an orthopedic setting, but that's we have to accept that the human system is so complicated and anything can work for anybody, but not everything works for everybody. That's a canned statement that I didn't know I was going to use, but anything can work for anybody. And that's where if it doesn't jive with your standards of anything, oh, that's garbage. Like, no, his shoulder really moved. Like I have seen this cockamamie manual therapy course, and they're talking about adhesions and sliding and all this nonsense that has zero substance. I've seen people. I've applied the technique, and your shoulder. Who cares? It just wasn't the same reason. It wasn't so that no, I don't know that. I spent the money. You know, that's fine. Like I don't think anybody should ever be shamed. Because I think that because if people can figure out what I'm talking about, I think it's a brilliant opportunity to practice using your hand. I think that it isn't all garbage. Like that because it's 4 days, you get incredible amounts of repetitions with very skilled manual therapists that are always going to be very helpful to coach you. So I'm trying to play both sides here. Just because it's not terribly scientific, number one, doesn't mean it doesn't work, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't attend this commercial product, especially for a young therapist who now you get in 3 days you can get a lot of repetitions of put your hands. Oh, now I see. You're like, that's okay. It's not adhesion. It's a change in the direction of the collagen. I could get into that, of which breathing has a significant value point too. But that's
There's a number of things that come into mind. There was a paper in 2017 that got rats and they damaged the tibialis muscle in the rats. And then they split them into two groups, and then one group they administered carbon dioxide through the skin. And then they sacrificed the rats and they looked at how much of the tissue had repaired. The group who had administered carbon dioxide through the skin had their muscle injury repaired.
That's what I just said. Yeah, because I use the angle of lower oxygen,
Yes.
Increased CO2. Yeah. No, CO2, and again, that goes back to your question of why is this not accepted, etc. The big piece of physiology is CO2 versus
Well, is there
oxygen.
another thing going on? Because if, for example, you do have an injury and if it's bothering you, it might bring on a little bit of anxiety.
There you go.
So now you're breathing faster and harder. So as a result, then you're getting rid of too much carbon dioxide from the blood through the lungs. This is driving up blood pH. Pain thresholds lower and pain perception increases.
Bingo, man.
It's kind of a vicious circle.
Are you familiar with an osteopath by the name of Leon
Yes.
Scheitau? Leon Scheitau would come to New York City once a year. He passed away a few years ago. This is not so much. I mean, the first time I learned how to breathe was when I'm trying to bench press. Like this is a very normal powerlifting type of thing. But he has a slide that, of course, I credit him if I put into one of my presentations. And it's like this line graph of what you just described. And I was like, God, this is why you're not supposed to blow up a balloon. But then I take that into a fitness component and how we set up intervals and understand also the old Soviets approach where they would have these huge rest periods so that you didn't have the glycolytic byproducts, even though you were training super, super explosively, you just truncate it. And they found that if you wound up with the end volume, which just took you more time, you still had a significant performance effect without the need to recover from the glycolytic byproducts, of which would be globally acidity, acidosis, hypoxia, and thermal changes. But at a local level, the oxidants, like peroxidation of lipids and reactive oxygen species, they're the rogues. They're the bad guys because they do all sorts of bad things.
So this is when somebody overtrains.
Yeah. So for instance, if I told you to ride the bike for 30 seconds as fast as possible, and you see, but I also want to take this back. I'm pretty sure we can agree that Leon Scheitau is not somebody that has a lot of experience in riding bikes really fast. Okay, but you see it's like if there's something again that I can help elucidate is like I live in all those worlds, and that might be frustrating to people, but I'm just some guy talking. Like that's all I am. If I ask you to sprint for 30 seconds on the bike, and then I gave you this very famous commercial interval of 30-30. So you did go as hard as you can, and you covered this much ground. If I only give you 30 seconds for until you go around, another 30 seconds. Your effort is high, meaning you are rocking. 30 seconds means you're glycolytic. No choice. 20 seconds for most people will be glycolytic. If you're really out of shape, it could be even less. But so now you're building up all of this byproducts, but you're getting this decreasing performance effect. You're not going fast. That might be good for general I'm not going to say that. It may have a utility for general population because they're just looking to burn calories, and on the bike is very, very forgiving. Not everybody does that stuff on a bike. They're doing cleans. They're doing stupid nonsense that. So now, as you build up all of this hydrogen ions and this local acidity, this is how you get injured. Even though you have a brilliant functional movement screen, you have great direction of tissue fibers, your breathing pattern is perfect on round one. But as soon as you start to use a very stupid rest period, you then start breathing heavy. You might get anxious, or you might not. That's just more mental on how do you perceive this sensory motor experience of having hydrogen ions floating around. So now the efficiency of your performance is done. Like you're working this hard, you're paying this price, but you're only getting this much return. So what would you do? You'd rest for 3 minutes. Oh, we don't have time for. Okay, well then pick something up. Do 30-30, just don't go so hard. So now you're saying below threshold. 30-15. Oh, it's ludicrous. So let's say if it was 30 seconds, the shortest sprint, maximum, you can't go 31-ish. I'd probably have people rest for 3 minutes. And what we're doing is looking at the literature of what are we getting when we see this buildup of acidosis / hydrogen ions. How long does it take for it to be maximally buffered? And the most prominent literature that would support that is sometimes up to 10 to 15 minutes.
Wow.
So the big fat power lifter that did a heavy double and then goes to sit down on the bench, maybe he actually knew something. But the goal is to always have high quality motor skill mastery while you perform your thing. Again, bike is good because it's fairly safe.
Yeah.
But but now that those long intervals allow you to not engage. But this is how now, if you're not keen to the acidosis, then comes the hypoxia, then comes the alpha pro 1 collagen that rewrites the tissue, and then all of a sudden you tear your hamstring when you had every performance measure from a musculoskeletal construct, but you didn't understand the physiology of which the Bohr effect is a role in that story. So that would be called anti-glycolytic training, where you just have to rest, and it changes the terminologies of aerobic and anaerobic. We don't really, I don't use those words. And of course, there's a high level of literature. And it's also not the only way to train. And it's not to suggest that acidosis is bad. For instance, anti-glycolytic training that does not build up significant acidosis, hypoxia, edema, you're leaving other adaptations on the table. So now we have to dance as to, how do we want to impact this person? All of these pieces can be manipulated through your volitional breathing.
Mm.
It's all very tied to me. It's all one big thing.
There's two things you spoke about. You spoke about Leon Chato, and
Love him, man, because he also he would talk, like he would spit a little bit. He didn't hold back.
and he put a connection between breathing and lower back pain.
Yeah.
And also then there's other studies then that we're looking at. Kyle Kiesel is a physical therapist.
Of course.
You know,
The first official, I didn't get a check. The first functional movement screen course that I was one of the presenters, he was the main presenter.
Oh.
Yeah, 2008.
Well, he's a recent paper in 2018, and he looks at the functional movement screen. He looks at breath hold, and he said we need to be able to assess people's breathing because there's a connection between their breathing and functional movement. If breathing isn't normal, movement isn't normal. And he concluded that breath hold time was the simplest way to assess somebody's breathing patterns. Like it's all the stuff that you talked about. It's slowly starting to creep in to the domain of physical therapy, but you knew about it when I brought it up. But I'd say a lot of other PTs don't know about it.
But that's okay, because again, if there is an aggrandizing commentary that I'll make about myself, is that I want to be better than that other. I in order for me to be better, I have to do more than they do, and that's okay. Like it's if they were to maybe they want to charge as much money as I do one day. Maybe they can keep up. But the other thing that I think, and this isn't only Kyle, but how did he get there? Well, Kyle is probably a fellowship level trained physical therapist from the Australian models, Paul Hodges, etc. Where go back to the late 80s when they were talking about transverse abdominis, which is dated and no longer, probably not accurate to pulling your belly button, but we can accomplish the same 25% of max volitional contraction of the transverse abdominis with a proper diaphragmatic breathing. So Kyle was already steeped in using breathing as a rehab approach, particularly for back pain, aka where Paul Hodges would be, a world champion level. So now, when take all the autonomics, take the metabolic respiratory components, when you can, as long as everything else is allowing it to happen, if you have this high level of intra-abdominal pressure, where the diaphragm goes first, then the air goes down, and this happens instantly, but again, I'm a cartoon. Like the air goes down, the diaphragm is like this, boom, okay? The air goes boom, it hits the pelvic floor. Except from a Kegel standpoint, you kind of hold in your pee, like I'm doing right now. But in the case of ideal movement, the pelvic floor goes like this. It's like a trampoline that pulls apart. It doesn't go up. Boom, it just pressurizes. And then it's got to go forwards. Boom, the transverse abdominis, and then it goes back, ding, multifidus, and all four of those muscles are probably demonstrating 25%. So it's not this heavy high EMG. The original research from that would look at those muscles, multifidus, transverse abdominis, pelvic floor, not the diaphragm as much, showed that high EMG was good, but they were just bracing, and they probably weren't measuring more types of variable movements.
So do you consider then the core, that a lot of people are considering the core to be primarily the abs? But what you're saying is that really we need to be looking at the pelvic floor, we've got the abs, you've got the muscles to the back, and you've got the diaphragm. So it's a box.
Canister is what the literature would say. Yeah. So it's this. So it has a front, back, and a top and bottom. And when you look at some of the most explosive, like any athlete who's like really, really good, they may not have this six-pack abs. They almost look a little bit fat. So I have abs. I have very noticeable abs. But nobody's ever going to confuse me for being like really skinny. Because as a power lifter, of which I'm not competing for many years now, you look round. And when you see like NFL players, when they don't look like bodybuilders. When you look at sprinters, they kind of have a belly, and that is from creating resting tension in that canister or the box, like what you're saying. So indeed, the core, I'll take you back many years, is at a seminar, and there was a Q&A. And the Q&A is like never cool. Like it's like, what book did you read? This gentleman, so all the speakers are up on the stage, and maybe this individual was, not all there, because he was angry. And he said, I think you guys are obviously all some really well-known speakers. And I was in the crowd, by the way. I was very young, so it's an emotion, you remember. I think you're all doing a disservice, though, because you all have different, you guys can't agree on what's a good core. And you all say it's so important. And like he was really vocal. And he said, so my question is to the panel, what is a strong core? And you got like 4 or 5 different answers, all of which had value. One of the ones that was wild was Thomas Myers, the rolfer from Maine. He said the core is from your, I don't know, medial malleolus to your hyoid. And I knew what he meant, because if anything in that chain is carriaged inefficiently, you can't bring that box that Hodges, and Kyle would talk a lot about. And then you would talk about intraabdominal pressure. So that you would talk about like what. So then if McGill was up there, he would say this, and then they would say this, and like it's all correct. But if you don't have an awareness of all the other, because they all have a role. So now, yes, that is what like an ideal core is, one that when you take an inhalation, it's circumferential. We can't say fat because that's going to tie into our initial discussion of bad words. But in your belly button, especially if you have an outie, you should be able to see that it goes this way and down. So it's going down. Like you're
Even just with normal breathing.
So that's how I would coach. Now I don't typically tell people to worry about it. It's too hard to hack. But if you hack it throughout training, then it should become like that.
Wow.
So it's like you're trying to put as much, like you're trying to go diagonal. I'm trying to do this for the camera. So so if you're laying into 3.5 month position, happy baby, dead bug, you're trying to get the air to go to your knees. It goes down so that it's a diagonal pattern. And again, from my influences, you'll start to see that it's not a perfect inner tube. Those are the areas of the viscera or the tissue, well, they're all tissue, but the muscle tissue that isn't getting pressurized. So the quality of the tissue, you might have the direction, but you're not putting air there for particular reasons. Now, that model has significant osteopathic value. I can train osteopathic for musculoskeletal, but then you'll start to gurgle, because then you have the sphincters, in your bottom, pelvic floor, right here, and then here. So if there's tension, all of a sudden you're training, reflux by releasing the tension, by instead of the rectus abdominis and the QL, which are all really, really important to sprint fast and to lift hard, lift heavy. But so now if something below that area changes how you carriage the pelvis, or something up here, which is probably significantly crucial, because the ribs have to do this. And if the pelvis is like this, the ribs have to do this. It's not an option. It's varying. I'm exaggerating. Remember, I always talk about a cartoon. But now you've got all the thoracic vertebrae that have to have variability and mobility. The ribs each have 2 joints to the thoracic. It's the costovertebral and the costotransverse. They're joints. They can be treated and mobilized and moved. Then you have intercostal muscles. So you have to normalize all of this. And then what's north affecting that? So to analyze the whole body is somewhat obligatory. And then you pick and choose what, or if you have a team of people that are really good at different things. So yes, the core is that box, but that doesn't always mean you can actually train it, because you can put them into happy baby, 3.5 month position, dead bug, and the breath looks nice. But as soon as you come north, because I'm giving away all of my hip flexors, I'm giving away psoas, I'm giving away rectus femoris, TFL, pectineus, adductor long, all of these ones that attach up here. If my hip is flexed, they're all relatively flat. The moment I get up onto my knees, now that changes it. So I have to then decide, can I help McKeown have a strong core from breathing and or bracing, etc., down that road? Or can I, maybe he already has this ideal or strong core, but his hip flexors don't have the skill, mobility or control, could be either one, then you got to look at that. They're like, oh man, his hip flexors are nice. How come he acts like they're tight? Because it's just a strategy. So there's another level of how do we then use breathing to then achieve all of these rehab, recovery. I don't know. You're just rebuilding the system. You take you have a puzzle with like 8,000 pieces and you dump it out on the table and you start to put it together. And to not have strong gravity for all the stuff that we're talking about, that's just how I do it. If somebody doesn't want to do it, so it's okay. Like I don't, but that's you may already have a strong core. Because if you're super stiff up here and super stiff here, which might be really, really good for that sport, but then you always have back pain. Or there's certain movements that they cannot express all of their physiological qualities. Maybe it's not back pain. Dude, like your core is strong as all get out. You need to change what's above and below. The joint, the what is, because they're in certain positions, they're constantly disallowing the stacked, where then the canister and the box can be filled. And we're a little bit further away from exhalation.
No, I get all your points, and it's actually causing me to think. So say for example, if somebody does a jog with their mouth closed and they're in zone 1, zone 2. So by breathing through the nose, it adds an extra resistance onto their breathing. So you're adding an extra load onto the diaphragm. Also, by breathing through your nose, you've got better recruitment of the diaphragm. So you're having to activate this more than what you would be doing, say, resting, for example. So it's both strength and function. And also by breathing through your nose, the carbon dioxide that's been produced by the muscles can't leave the body so quickly, so it accumulates in the lungs and blood. So we can target then the biochemical dimension. So here's just breathing through the nose, which could be useful for recovery. You spoke about all-out intensity, but there has to be recovery.
Of course.
But why has nasal breathing been forgotten about in sports when it might have a good potential in terms of aiding in recovery, increasing oxygen delivery to the working muscles, reduce lactate post physical exercise, reduce fraction of expired oxygen, meaning that the body is able to utilize oxygen better recruitment of the diaphragm. There's a lot going on there, but yet it has been overlooked. Do you ever come across it in?
Again, the confirmational bias that one of the things that I was excited to hear was just that, because usually that list is hard for me to memorize. So just always breathe in through your nose. Ideally, you'll also breathe out through your nose, but I'm like, there's a whole nother seminar just on the reasons why this is very important. Yeah, the all that. So I would champion that. I have to unfortunately go back to because of very, very foolish work to rest ratios, maybe in the settings that you're talking about, which may appear to be very successful for general fitness goals, aka lose weight and look good naked. Remember, those people are just training a few hours per week, and then they're a soccer mom or they're going to work, so they don't have this other load, at least at a musculoskeletal level. But because of and I'm just theorizing, and unfortunately it's not terribly positive, that because their work to rest ratios are so foolish and inconsistent.
What do you mean by that in terms of work to rest? So you're saying they're doing an all-out effort,
or they're working so hard
physically,
in their training, and they're not resting long enough, or they're too hard means it's too long, or something. It's something inconsistent with their current capacity, and then they don't rest consistent with the laws of, in this case, biology.
So they don't take the next day off or something.
It could be that, and it's very hard to remain in those low threshold strategies of breathing through your nose when your body is constantly in this payment phase. Whatever adaptations they're done, but you're still paying for those adaptations. So while you're paying, So for instance, I had a set I have a coach, he tells me what to do, I do it. RDLs, and I had to do 3 sets of 8 to 10, and I always go as heavy as I want to go. So I did the first 2 sets. So what's call it a 150 kilo. Okay, so it's I have to convert, and I did the first 2 sets, and after each one, I could not breathe through my nose. Okay, so if I'm holding 350 pounds, where and that's why using resistance training is not always a great proxy for the things that we're talking about. In this case, I did it long enough, and I couldn't do it. Now I waited, and after the first one, I'm like, I don't even know if I'm doing the second one. I did not do the third. I only did 2 wheels instead of 3.5. So because I worked so hard, I felt comfortable and safe going into my work, but I could not breathe through my nose. It was not humanly possible for now. I paid for that. So it's not, in my mind, it's not necessarily bad that I couldn't breathe through my nose because I paid for this. Like I went to that restaurant and I got what I wanted and I paid the bill, because there are some other things that are going to happen from pulling, big wheels. But I couldn't do 3. So I overcharged. I got overdrawn. If your training is always closer to that, plus whatever non-physical stressors in your life, like you get yelled at a lot, it's very hard to breathe through your nose, and you don't even know. Plus the mechanical thing, like I have, or I think I have, I don't know. I don't know what I have, because after I warm up, I can do zone 2 with my mouth closed.
Yeah.
But I can't breathe if I close one nostril. There's something wrong. We're going to figure it out. So there's also a physical thing, a mechanical obstruction that many other people. But I think, and again, I think breathing through your nose is a marker of you're not training hard. That's a sociological opinion that I have.
Yes.
And that might answer your question, because I don't know why. Maybe people don't know. Oh, I didn't even know. Okay, fine, do it now.
But the thing is, and I think that's the view that a lot of people take, is that if you're breathing through your nose, you're not training hard.
Yeah.
They don't take into consideration that if you continue breathing through your nose, your body adapts. And now you can do physical exercise with less ventilation. So now you become more efficient. And it'll be interesting. I'll show you an exercise in a while when we finish to see if we can open up your nose.
Oh man, I got to bring out my checkbook.
And also nasal dilator.
You know what is interesting? If I put the thing on my nose, the breathe right strip, that it works. I noticed something.
Yeah, I used them as well. These were our own ones. So somebody's ability to do physical exercise with mouth closed, it depends on the airway, it depends on their Bolt score, and it depends on their fitness.
Yeah. So it was very of why I believe it's an obstruction, and this is a little. If we edit it out, it's fine. But I don't. My Bolt score would be horrible. But
that's because you have a lot of muscle mass. So
okay.
You have a higher metabolism.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
That's not to impact it.
Well, I was about to say, like my performance in an anti-glycolytic environment, which is primarily my training adaptations, what I'm really good at. But I also, I don't think in my adult life, maybe 10 years, I might have gotten over 180 once. But I can go, and my effort is high. So there's probably something unique, but maybe it's also, I would always describe it as this, what I'm good at. Like I was at one point a very good power lifter, 300, 400 kilo level, but in the squat. So, my development, and like when I was little, I was always fast, but I couldn't, I'd be lucky if I cleared like a 6.5 minute mile at my best, like with a lot of training.
Sure.
So it's just what God made me one way. So I kind of rationalize that when I don't score well on the Bolt test. But the other thing too, that to complement, there's models, what do we call it? Recovery breathing. So how can I, when I am jacked and I am in a significant acute distress. The figurative example, I showed a picture of the MMA fighter in the corner. So you're gassed, and these are elite, and again, the folks that I work with are somewhat well known. it's like this partial breathing. So you're not challenging the pace of how you inhale and exhale, but you manipulate and we allow for the exhalation to remain hit, hit, hit. So you're actually getting one exhalation, but if you cut it off, there's less CO2 that's leaving. And then you would actually want to get to, because runners can do this while they're running. So it's like your second wind. So that would fit into I'm still,
Yeah.
but if I go, I don't get this sense of.
I wonder if in terms of something going on with the diaphragm there. You would think that the breath in through the nose and out through the mouth, you're going to get rid of greater carbon dioxide from the lungs and blood.
Yeah.
This will reduce acidity and this will affect air hunger. But I wonder if there's something with the staggered breath in and out that it's almost bringing some communication to the diaphragm. I don't fully, I haven't broken that down as to what's going on with it.
So I would call that a form of recovery breathing, where clearly when you have a forceful exhale, the diaphragm, all of like you're taking a punch, that has to have something to do with it, because then I do believe there's an autonomic value as your diaphragm drops from an exhalation, not an inhalation. The phrenic nerve, etc., is stimulating something that kind of creates this something that. But that's when you see, and again, you would see the best fighters, I don't know, can you see this on the screen? Like, sure, but you're getting really fat. Yeah, here. Yeah. And I would say if anyone resting can do what I just did, and I'm not fatigued, so it's not hard. But that to me is very interesting. Yeah. So let me use the bathroom. Sure. Yeah. When I fly.
So just in terms, we were kind of talking, myself and Charlie. Charlie's coming from the PT world, and I'm coming from the breathing world. And it's almost as if the boundaries in terms of there's some crossover with breathing.
Now I graduated from PT school in 1999. I don't know that I'm in the PT world. I went to college with her. And she's on the board of the APTA, the American Physical Therapy Association. A few years ago, she messaged me, "You're amazing." Like, just because I'm public, I don't care about any of this stuff. I do it so I can make money to have the lifestyle that I want. And it doesn't suck, but sometimes it does. Sure. She's like, "Anytime you ever want to speak, we would love to have you." And I'm like, I don't have the heart to say, yeah, that's not my crowd. Like they're not gonna laugh. They're not gonna. Where's your research for that? And like, come on, man. Like, where my research is right here in my, Wells Fargo. You're like, wait, come on. Like, so so I went to a national conference a few weeks ago as a student, et cetera. And I'm like, people are like, they don't know. I'm like, because this isn't it's not my tribe. And if I did want to grow my reach into that space, I would have to communicate probably differently that I don't like to communicate, or because like at that level, it's like this make-believe medical conference. All people medical conferences, and that's like, I don't know, people in my world, they're like shocked. Yeah, like these big doctor conferences that cost like thousands of dollars, they don't get paid. The reason they don't get paid is so that there's no bias on the information. They just, here's my research, this is what I did. I'm like, I want to tell stories. I want to help you be better at what you do. And there's value for both. So I don't know if I'm in the PT world. However,
so who was your tribe?
I'm probably more known in strength and conditioning. I've been very I walked out of PT school into the NBA, and I've had very up until a certain point, I had some very high profile, glorified type of jobs, if you will. And around a little bit towards the end of when I was working for someone else, because now I just work for myself, that's when social media blew up for what we do and the messages that we have. How else like back then, like I remember there was some of the young people that I still these are my kids, if you will. They would have taken more courses, continuing education courses, before they graduated. They took more courses before they graduated than I took in the first 10 years. And because they just didn't exist. It wasn't this, cacophony. Don't get mad using big words. This plethora, another big word. I get yelled at for using big words. Because that cacophony is the word, because there's so much noise.
Yeah.
And you can tell the tone changes because I have no idea why people find gravity. Like they're blowing up balloons. Like this is the most, we just talked about it. I do think you would have challenged me in a very professional way if anything I was saying was scientifically false. Like this is your jam. But that's the world that I'm more known in. And because of social media, and because when the student, what's the line? When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. My message really is about everybody, because like I feel like I know enough of a lot of different things, and I've been lucky enough to have a chance to actually do it. So I'm not most people on the internet that have significant value, following and financial value, et cetera. Every single thing that I'm saying, I have actually done. And most of the time I've done it with your heroes, like major, people. And I don't talk about anything. And I think I hope that comes out. Like I'm not just talking, I'm not just repeating things. And because I may carry myself more juvenile than my age, it's you don't realize I've been around. I graduated. I had my certified athletic trainer. I don't know if you know, like that's like the guy that it's a good thing. It's in America, it's kind of not always highly respected. Because it's not like in Europe it's different. Like they're physios, like that it's different. Like a physio is kind of closer to a certified athletic trainer.
Right, because I often put physios and physical therapists quite together here.
Yeah, it's a little different, and then it's all different in Canada, where I'm not from Canada, but I for 10 years I'd be in Canada at least 3 months out of the year. So I got my ATC in 97, and then finished PT school in 99. So I've been around a little bit, as well as when this stuff wasn't like the only way to learn this was like, you would ask somebody out on a date. I would go to Ireland and be like, hey, I'd love to, I hear you talking about these things. That was how you kind of got the high level of information. During my time as physical therapist, there was only like 3 or 4 commercial brands.
Wow.
And they had all these levels, so there was enough for everybody.
So in 25 years, it's really blossomed.
It probably in a shorter. I think the internet, because I was probably an early adopter. Like I'm not an influencer. I will not make this claim. I might be a thought leader, and I enjoy the social media, like doing it. But I make it very clear, and everyone can listen. Like this is part of how I make money. Like whether anyone likes this, like we have chosen to give our time, and I think we're blessed and lucky that we can help people. But at some point, there is going to be either an implicit or explicit ask, because it's not dirty to ask for money. Like that, we're helping you. Like you can pay for this, not this one. This is on us.
Sure.
So I stuck with it. But in the beginning, it was blogs, and I was good at writing. Or so maybe people thought, and people were saying, and plus the in the beginning, so people probably wouldn't know, but if I put the video of when I squatted 800 pounds, I was a head strength coach in the NBA, and this doesn't make he doesn't look like he should be using big words.
Sure.
So now there was like this interest of like, let me hear what this person has to say.
Yeah.
There was when I was the head physical therapist for Marine Corps Special Operations, Colonel George M. Bristol is a very famous United States Marine. And he was my kind of mentor because I really struggled in that time in my life in that space. And he said, Charlie, you should work out with the guys at lunch. I'm like, F that. I don't want to think this is not no, like I'm not. He's like, if they see you bouncing 5 wheels up and down, because they all knew about powerlifting. They knew about me. Because I was the guy. I was the one that they spent all this money to come to as a essential warfighting civilian. That's what I was called. I was not a Marine. But a lot of Marines described it differently, which is incredibly flattering and very special. The first toast of my wedding was
Wow.
it's very special. So I said, I don't want to be training with these guys, man. This is not. I want to train for. He's like, if they see you bouncing 5 wheels up and down, they will respect you. This is the wrong reason for them to respect you, but they will respect you. And so those different things like create an interest. I have
I think it's human behavior, though.
Yeah,
You're not just talking about, but you're doing it.
Yeah, so there was I think people know, and because of my choices to be somewhat public in the and give a window into some of the worlds that and the whether it's celebrities or athletes, I'm still kind of like, if you know, you know, because I typically get paid. So not only is there a legal responsibility to not disclose, they don't care, but I don't like to ask because they're getting paid. But then every so often there's no, come on, let's do this. Like there's a the first time I saw Josh Brolin, you know who this is, the actor. And this was around because I saw him
It's
with
based out here, is Malibu, I think.
yeah. And so I had no intention to charge him because he was on the tour to promote the first Deadpool because Ryan Reynolds was a big part of our gym, and we all have the same stylist, of course. Can you tell? Anyway, they all got him to come see me because he did all his own stunts. Him and Ryan typically at least in the first Deadpool, and I'm a big comic book guy, and it's I remember asked Liev Schreiber, hey, everybody knows you and Logan are not brothers. Like they changed the stories for the movies versus the comics. So anyway, I had no intention to charge Josh Brolin. I just wanted a picture, and I wanted to do the snap.
Yeah,
that picture is kind of well known. Like you can see it on my Instagram. I share it a lot. He paid anyway, and I'm like, no, it's just cool for the picture. He's like, my assistant already paid you. Like, come on, let's take the picture. Like, and it's so I don't think there's any human on Earth that has a picture with Thanos also doing the snap. So I like because let's say we're at a party and you come up to me and my wife and you're like, oh, so what do you do? I look at my wife. I don't even like. I just because really what I want to do and I use physical preparation. I'm a problem solver, and I have a lot of opportunities to work outside of our profession of helping the human system because like they're my patients. Like these are companies, et cetera, CEO types, and they're like, Charlie, I need you to come talk to like our top 8 guys. I need you to talk to our board. I need you to do that. I'm like, what? I don't know anything about like packaging or whatever. He's like, no, they're gonna want to hear about Marsoc. They're gonna want to hear about all the superheroes and the NBA. But the way you look at problem solving and you don't discount anything, and you're talking about stuff that I know you don't even know how to do, but you kind of know that it needs to be in. That's what you're a CEO. Like that's what I do I don't know how to run the taxes. I just know if he does it right or wrong at the end of the year if we're getting buried in taxes.
Yep.
So I think I don't like to say physical therapist or coach. I'm just some dude, and I'm always very thankful if somebody wants to hear what I have to say.
So you've crammed a lot into the 25 years, and you've pulled from different disciplines.
Yeah,
and it's almost that you've brought it together. I think you need to write a book.
I think the way I think that's what if somebody. Maybe my senior. I'm not saying you are.
I'm 50.
You are. They would describe that. That's Charlie like is somebody that brings things together. And I had a gentleman. We were having dinner. We had a big sushi boat, and he's like, Charlie, there's probably not a lot of discussions that you can't sit at the table. I used to say that one of those topics would be like nutrition. That is no longer the case. But it wasn't because I felt like I needed this other shirt. It was if you have knee surgery and your quad is not getting better or bigger by a certain point in time, McKeown, how much protein do you eat a day? Oh, I don't even like write it down. So if the muscle is going to hypertrophy with normal load and stress, it doesn't matter unless, so we had to dig in. And that's also my wife's kind of gimmick in her. So you live it in the house. I think something that maybe people will find interesting is that if somebody comes to me for a solution, let's say it's physical therapy, because that's the biggest funnel. Number one, I would prefer that they would already know that I don't waste people's time. I charge enough that they will get the solution. It just might not be me that does it.
Sure.
And I take an approach to unraveling their puzzles by I'm trying to get you as far away from me as possible. Because if I can do that, it has to be right.
Yeah.
Like, and it's noble. It's like, so hold on.
You don't want to make that person reliant on you.
Or, well, if I have that special tool that they need, but because I know how to look for other tools that I don't have, like surgery, for instance.
Yeah.
Like people come to me looking for solution. I'm like, McKeown, I think we got to get this done. Okay, doesn't mean you have to go see. Well, I have a guy. No, you need to see my guy. Otherwise, all bets are off because we need this circular form of communication. So I feel like, and I don't leverage the financial component to that.
Yeah.
That's how I can get my consultation numbers to a very impressive level compared to others, because I'm building that in. Not only do you have a jump the line card for the best surgeons in the world at Hospital for Special Surgery, I'm not gonna like. I also know about training, and people come to me just to train, and that's cool.
Wow.
So it's
there's a lot even for a young healthcare or a young person going into the fitness space.
Yeah,
they can take a lot from this.
I would say over the last, I guess we'll call it 5 or 6 years, I do think that even though it's
becoming saturated.
no, well, that wasn't like maybe, but I don't really know. What I do know is because I was also going to give credit to a model that I really have significant disdain for, which would be CrossFit. But they've also done some good things. Like multiple things can be true. That intense, like not real, but it's nonsense. Like, because I also don't really know what they do now as they had certain changes in their leadership. But I think that, and then not only me, but maybe me, that physical therapy has a role when your knee doesn't, you didn't just wake up from surgery. Like performance physical therapy. Dare I say that I might have I may be credited for that, where now you'll go into a very traditional payment model for physical therapy, and it looks like a gym. There's 2 racks, there's still treatment tables and etc. But there's like, am I in the right place? And not only me, but that was my thing, because I actually think that you can solve more commercial physical therapy solutions with just intelligent training. You don't need, mobilization and all this nonsense that people do. And if I were to come see somebody and be like, no, you just train. What? Just train. Like you need to find the right hat. I can help you like this. It's probably not cost effective, but if I give you to my guy, just train and basic stuff.
Train in a particular way.
Yeah. Whereas, I had a horrible consult the other day with the gentleman has such back pain, he couldn't even sit. And of course he denied it. I'm like, dude, you were just writhing in pain. Like, and there was probably a very psychosocial component to that as I was asking him questions about it. And he just wants to train. And I'm like, I have no advice for you. Like, I cannot virtually sound like you don't need my permission. You do whatever you want, but I have no advice. Like, I'll give you your money back. Like, this is not even remotely, a possible value point for you. So he does need needles and but it has to be at the same time.
Yeah.
That's the other thing too, that where like this handoff. No, like everybody is in at the same time. Like if your shoulder's in a sling here, that doesn't mean you can't bench press with this arm. Now that's not allowed to do it. Just pick the right loads. And I don't think there's a lot of people that know enough of, okay, well, Charlie, if I put 80 pounds he's gonna, no, I make up a word. It's called reverb. You're not allowed any reverb. But if I bench press here with 70, let's say 50, and then the shoulder stays good. But Charlie, they're not getting strong. I don't care if they're getting strong. We're gonna manipulate the sets and reps, etc. Acidosis, hypoxia, to stimulate hormonal and immune impact, because every shoulder gets better faster with good hormones and good immune system and a good heart and lungs and good mitochondria. Like every human on earth. So you asked me before about resilience. Maybe that's I don't call it that. That's to me, those are the primary factors of everything that we're doing. Now, do you need to do other things to get to those money protocols? Of course. Now you need everybody to, but you're not allowed to not agree. I don't care what you do. You can use chunky peanut butter, but you're not allowed to say like, no, they shouldn't be. What do you mean they shouldn't be doing that?
Yeah.
The little girls that can bang out pull-ups don't sprain their ankles that much. That's my research. Like, sue me. So like, why are you having her do pull-ups or she has an ankle? Like, because now there probably is some stupid construct of like, well, the lats are attached to thoracolumbar fascia, and the thoracolumbar fascia allows you to posterior tilt, and then your glute medius, where there is evidence that a strong glute medius doesn't sprain your ankle. You good now? Like, and I could probably go on about all those things. If that's physical therapy, then fine. But I also think that those seeds were planted when I was a very young physical therapist and I was in professional sports, where the goal, like, you can't make Andre Iguodala jump higher, and I can't make Chris Webber, do no look passes any better than what he already does. What I can do is apply strategies that keep them as high as their level can possibly be for 82 games, and available. So now that's that performance therapy that is in professional sports. I think when I was in the NBA, I might have been the only physical therapist.
Wow.
But I was the strength coach. I wasn't like the team physical therapist. And I actually didn't start as the strength coach. I was the assistant athletic trainer. And because we didn't have a strength coach, and this is like 2000s even, like it wasn't a thing. And they're like, Chuck Wagon, come here, go put me through one, based on how I looked. And I was way heavier than because I was like right in the middle of my powerlifting heyday. And I knew how to lift weights, but I didn't know how to train athletes. But that's kind of how I had. I don't remember if I found Yanda before Sarman. I don't know, you know these names, Yanda, yeah? Like Yanda was a pediatric neurologist. He's kind of like the patriarch of DNS in Czech.
Okay.
Yanda and Levitt were the old heads.
Okay.
So breathing and all this, but they were neurologists.
Yeah.
And then they got into the musculoskeletal spaces. Sarman was a physical therapist, and I think she's still around, where she didn't use any manual therapy. It was all movement. And then it's like, well, if you like somebody, if you're into them, you got to go find this. You got to go find this guy. You got to go find this guy. So you find, and you start to, because to me, it was always about training. Like the goal is training. Now you see maybe why in the APTA, like that's not what they do. It's they're doing all this other stuff. And breathing, as I tie it back to the things that I think you're most passionate about, it's everything. Yeah, it's breathing lives in it's very, very useful, defensible, scientific merit. Very, very different to squat 800 pounds than to modulate your autonomic nervous system, as evidenced by RMSSD or some kind of hard metric that we know or we think we know said, I did what I thought I did. It's obligatory.
Yeah.
And then there's links, and that's the red thread. The red thread. I don't think we got it on camera. I think it might be useful to say that breathing is the only physical activity that I know of that is mitigated by the central nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, and whatever we're going to call peripheral somatic. It's the only thing. And we can't go back to the central. Like the central is running in the background. Like we cannot.
Well, we can influence it though through our breaths, because there's a communication going from the body to the brain.
Oh no,
Our breathing.
I'm saying we can't. You can't like turn it off.
Oh,
Like,
sure,
yeah, that's
of
what I
course,
mean.
yes,
That's
yes,
what we're
yes,
saying.
yes.
God forbid if anyone has ever lost someone from drowning, it wasn't because they stopped breathing. It was because they gasped out and then breathed in water. Like they didn't because the nervous system cannot shut off your breathing. Like you can't hold your breath and die. Like that's not possible.
Yes, you pass
Yeah.
out and your breathing does resume.
Yeah. So but obviously the middle one, the autonomic piece that's most exciting for recovery, et cetera, can be manipulated by your active breathing. But then we talked about the fractional breathing, emergency fraction, like that's called fractional breathing. That is a clearly volitional piece that allows you that is really for performance, but it cannot have this autonomic impact.
Of course.
And then of course the you're getting into a crawling position where your elbow is here but not here, and then somehow magic happens. But it's we with all research will say like we require more data or
We do.
yeah.
We do. Well, Charlie, I think I'll bring it to a close.
Cool.
And the conversation was great. I really enjoyed it. So
That's good. That's
tying
good.
everything in together.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I hope our listeners as well got a lot out of it. I think if you're a young individual or person just going into the whole fitness industry, I think there's a lot of stuff there. In other words, learn what you can, be the best that you can, and be open-minded. And the language that we spoke about at the very, very beginning.
Mhm.
Final words for yourself.
If I were to carry what it can never, it can't always be what you do. And that is meant to kind of knock you a little bit. You know, it can't, we have to be able to say that what we are great at and what we're most passionate, it's like we want it to be that. Like we want to carry the football. But if we can look at situations and be like, I'm not the guy. It's about the patient, it's about the client. And I don't think that happens.
Enough.
Yeah.
You're saying that people don't admit that they are failing.
Yeah, but again, that message was a little bit propped for me to talk because I do find that the most brilliant individuals that are read, that are practicing, that are passionate about that autonomic pathway of where breathing fits, they need to hear what I said. Because you can say all you want that people are in your care because they did something deleterious with heavy weights in their hands. No, they just picked the wrong way. Like it's not bad for everybody, but because we're always hardened in our own psychology, it's like, oh yeah, lifting is bad, or like, oh yeah, they can't do that. Like, you know, no, come on, like and that's what I hope that by being able to dance in all these different songs, I can say, like, no, like there's absolutely a way, and it should be heavy. You're not allowed to tell me you get stronger from Pilates. Like that's not allowed. Like there's no, you can say something good happened, but you can't make strong. Like it's not heavy enough. Like stop. Doesn't mean it's bad. So I hope that that's when you see that there is a way to draw this red thread. It can't always be what you want it to be. Sometimes you need surgery. Sometimes you should be lifting heavy stuff. Sometimes you shouldn't. Yeah. But can we get to that pathway where everybody is in on this? I think is exciting.
Great.